Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the September SFTA event, otherwise known as the Yom Kippur IT meeting. For those of you who should be celebrating, let me ask first, does anyone know my father, Nat Chessel? Do you know Nat Chessel? Do not let him know you saw me. I was not here. There's a guy that looks just like me, but he's Catholic, he's Italian. Lenny, you know, Lenny, right? Yeah. Sal, where's my buddy Sal? Sal, you'll vouch for me, right? Anyway, so a happy new year, Lashana Tova, to those of you who are celebrating. Hopefully you ate enough shrimp to hold you through the fast. Yeah, there were some funny comments, I have to tell you. It's like, I didn't see any emails, so Lenny, I wasn't sure if you were going to show up or not. I kept it on the down low just for that reason. So again, welcome. This is a very proud moment for us to be here in the new Citrix space. I think Ed Iacobucci thought he was in a New York hotel when he went to the restroom. He wasn't sure where he was. It's very different. It's lovely. There was a guy in there, by the way. You had to give him $1 and he gave you a little spritz. So we wouldn't be here if not for our sponsors. So I'd like to take a moment and we'll talk about them in a little bit, but certainly Citrix this evening, we'll talk about that. We have some new members I'd like to talk about, but most importantly, we are here for just another exciting event brought to us by Citrix, by the way. How many of you were at our September event last year up at the old IBM facility? So, thank you. And if you were there, that's why you're here, by the way, because you just knew that this was going to rock yet again. How many of you are at an SFTA meeting for the first time? Hold your hands up. One of my fellow board members said, if we don't sign up 30 of you, we should be ashamed. So would at least 30 of you please sign up so we don't have to be ashamed? You could sign up as a member, you could sign up as a sponsor, you could join us for golf, which we'll talk about. But this is what it's all about. This is what people talk about in building a tech community, is having all of us in one place at one time. And the importance of having the rock stars that you're going to hear is really just the tip of the iceberg of the wonderful stuff that's happening here. And there's going to be some very interesting, not only presentations, but some awards tonight. So you're lucky to be here, but we really appreciate you being here. So very quickly, we're going to talk about the pre-event workshop was brought to us by Iron Mountain. Angelo's here somewhere. Hopefully you guys got to sit through that. So thank you, Iron Mountain, silver sponsor for this evening. Our other silver sponsors for this evening are 3C Interactive, one of our finalists, right? I think this is like these are. No, come on, 3C Interactive. These guys rock. AAJ Technologies, doing some amazing stuff in healthcare here in South Florida. ProTech, Deborah, thank you. And our friends at Sprint. Why would a mobile company want to be here tonight, right? Who's here from Sprint? Thank you, Sprint. A couple of new members are here this evening. We have WSI, Value on Net, Ruben. Boy, oh boy, how do you say this? How about Zoikos, Xoikos? How close did I get? Oh, they're not here. I could screw it up. Plastridge Agency. We've got Patrick from Plastridge, if you're here. Thank you. And new member and current board member, we have Juan Lopez from Sandown Media. Juan, wherever you are, my brother with a cajon in his trunk for me. If you see a deal going down in the parking lot later, it's legit, completely legit. So I have we like to call him Bubala. Yeah, and why are you here on Yom Kippur, Glenn? Yeah. Glenn's going to talk to us a little bit about the second annual SFTA Golf Classic. He's going to give you some of the details. Jackie sent out, this is how awesome this group of people is. Jackie sent out an email today and said, who wants to sponsor the event? And instantly, we had a presenting sponsor, the name sponsor. It's going to be brought to you by Host.net. Go figure. Oh, by the way, Lenny Chessel from Host.net. Our friends at Peak 10, Stefan's here. another board member. Level 3, Joe, another board member. FPL FiberNet, Lonnie is here. She's our vice president this year. Data Access Worldwide, that's Chip Casanave. He's our chairperson. And then AAJ Technology stepped up, and they also have a beautiful basket for a giveaway. I want to make sure everybody knows there are raffles. So if you've placed your business card in the bowl, you're going to win something. It's big, really, really big. And if you haven't, you don't have a hi, Raj. How are you? Mr. Rajawal, ladies and gentlemen. So Glenn, tell us a little bit about golf, please.
Am I allowed to put my golf hat on?
Please. That's like a yarmulke.
That's good. Will you bless me now? So those of you that have been wondering why I'm walking around with a golf club, I think you've got the answer now. People were asking me earlier, you're going to hurt me with this thing? So enough said. We announced last month that we have our golf tournament on Friday, November 2nd. We made a slight change to the golf course thanks to the other golf course. Right, Jackie? Wasn't that wonderful? The poor girl was scrambling. Give her a hand, by the way.
Scrambling,
she was scrambling, believe me. So, same time, same day, which is going to be Friday, November 2nd. Registration at 7. We start the kickoff. We play golf at 8 o'clock. It's now at Jacaranda. So you may want to write this down. Jacaranda Golf Course, which is in Plantation, so not very far from where we were going to have it. So even though that Lenny has announced our sponsors, we're still looking for other sponsors, all kinds of fun stuff. We're going to have all kinds of things going on, hole-in-one, longest drive, et cetera, et cetera. I need volunteers. I need foursomes, so show of hands. Who's giving me foursomes already? I need foursomes. Come on, we can't do this.
There you go.
I got one foursome.
All right.
That's it.
You're going to win first prize.
First prize. You're going to be the only ones out. I see two. So I need foursomes. I need sponsors. I need raffle prizes because we want to give away a lot of fun stuff. So if you can't even be there, we'll take raffle prizes. If you can be there, can't sponsor, I'll take volunteers as well. So we're not too proud out here. We look forward to having you out here. Let's continue this great networking that we're doing tonight. So in a couple of months, we'll go play golf. Let's get outside, play under the clouds with all the cloud makers, as I call it. So thanks for your time. Thank you.
Mazel tov. All right, next, exciting announcement. About, 6 or 7 months ago, a whole bunch of IT leaders got together for dinner, and I think we had a drink or two, and out of that dinner came a pretty exciting idea, which was get every tech organization in South Florida, every tech company, every university associated with that has a tech program, IS program, every workforce organization, and all show up in one place at one time. Kind of like this, but not necessarily better, but bigger. We're expecting some 1,000 people. Nova Southeastern University has offered to provide the facilities. James, Dr. Parrish, wherever you are, thank you so much, and Jessica. So on 12/12/12, potentially starting at 12 and ending at 12, or as Traver and I were saying, maybe we start at 12 o'clock, 12/12/12, meaning 12 o'clock and 12 minutes and 12 seconds on 12/12/12. It's a lot of 12s, I know. And we all know what happens at midnight on that day, right? It's all over anyway as we know it, so we may as well all be together having a really good time. And if not, well, we would all have been together having a good time. Anyway, it's IT Palooza. For those of you who Joe knows, I'm a drummer in a few rock and roll bands. And it's going to have a rock and roll theme, and there will be live bands and music and jam sessions. There will be a keynote address I keep asking all these famous guys if they're interested, but haven't hooked any of them yet. But if you know somebody famous, wink, wink, we're still looking for a keynote speaker. And it's just going to be a really cool event. So 12/12/12, put it in your calendars, Nova Southeastern University, every tech organization in South Florida, all in one place at one time for the first time ever. So we're really excited about that. Do you guys know what SFT is all about? Did you see that? Building a globally recognized technology community in South Florida. We really are that, folks. It's chatting with Trevor before, and he started up a new group, and it could be anywhere. And the people told him, you could put this thing anywhere you want. And he said, I want it in Florida, because he knows what's here. And we know if you look around the room, there is a tremendous amount of talent in this room. And companies are getting financed, and companies have leadership, and companies have great technology that's being developed, what we're going to talk about tonight in terms of the wireless stuff and the mobile stuff. It's happening right here, and that's why I make a big deal about our friends at 3C, because It's really awesome what's happening here. This is worldwide, affecting technology right here in South Florida. Last year, we celebrated the advent of the PC. This year, we're talking, I just had a wonderful conversation. Now I know where it started, right here. So it's unbelievable. So what you're going to hear is really exciting. We're going to go deep like we did last year, and you're going to hear some really great in-depth stories. So we couldn't do that without having you all together, and we're very proud to present this tonight. It wouldn't be possible without Citrix. And Chris Fleck, we are so blessed to have you on our board. Thank you. We had a very formal bio, and Chris said, nah, don't do that. So I'm going to give you the brief one. Chris is the VP of Mobility Solutions at Citrix, managing the technology alliances, and he gets to play with the cool gadgets. And he gets paid. Do you get paid as well, Chris? I think you should pay Citrix for allowing you to have the fun you have. How did he get that job? Okay, so he already asked. He's part of the Citrix CTO office. He drives mobility strategy and looks for what to do next. More fun. Before Citrix, Chris founded a startup in Boca Raton that was a spinoff from IBM, developed the first server blades, so he's still an entrepreneur at heart, which I think in a big company you call it an intrapreneur, right? Prior to that, Chris was the business unit executive for the Industrial Computer Group at IBM. He has a BS in engineering from NYU Poly, an MBA from Union College. He's a board member of SFTA. Like I said, we're so lucky to have him. Serves on the industry advisory board at FIU and FAU, and we're glad he's finally doing some work for SFTA. I mean, he's so busy that he forgets about us until he has one little job to put together one event a year, and look what he's done. So without further ado, Chris Fleck.
We got lots of empty seats up there, and just take 2 minutes, walk up that way, grab a seat, because I don't think you'll be disappointed if you hang around till the end, and certainly we saw that. So
I didn't get VIP parking. Can I have one of these chairs?
there you go. Not that one.
Not this one.
That's Dan. Dan's. He's gone.
Oh, Dan Marino.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Before Nutrisystems.
Okay, so nobody else wants to sit? It really pisses me off that there's some empty seats here. And I think I know why, though, because everybody here is kind of a mobile fan, right? And there was probably a lot of you waiting online. I know Gus, where is he? You're waiting online for the Apple Store the other day for your iPhone 5. And the trouble is, right, the maps kind of stink. Right, and some of you have probably even just upgraded your 4S or your 4, right? And so the trouble is, if you ask your 4S, you ask Siri, how do you get to Cypress Creek Road? This is where you end up. Where's Adam? Thank you, Adam, for that. So it's a good thing, with Citrix, we talk about you can work from anywhere. So if you got a boat, you can still work. You can work from anywhere here. But seriously, I wonder how many people here actually knew where the first smartphone came from. It's like before you heard about this event. How many? So 3 hands, 4 hands, 5. Not a lot, right? And isn't that amazing? Like that the first smartphone actually came from right here in South Florida, and we're going to hear the real history of how that came about. But the point of what we're doing here now is not just to reflect on the old stuff, because the old stuff is really cool. At least I like hearing the old stuff, so I want to hear some cool old stories. But it's also new stuff as well. So, there's new cool companies we're going to talk about. There's new, technologies. There's entrepreneurs. There's not just startups. And matter of fact, the biggest mobility event, right, is the Mobile World Congress that's held once a year in Barcelona. And they gave out 2 awards this year. in 2012 back in March, and one was for the best consumer app, and that was, no surprise, Angry Birds. Not made here. But the best enterprise app named by Mobile World Congress was made right upstairs. So it's not just 20-year-old stuff. Where's Gus? Where's Steven? There you go. So there's some really cool stuff going on right now. And then we're going to talk about some of the startups as well that are really cool and I'd love to hear about. So, it's really about the tech community. We talked about the tech community. Last year I mentioned, what is Silicon Valley doing right? And it's all about the culture there where, there's risk-taking and acceptance of failure, and it's an achievement to like how many times you got to try it before you strike it big, and then the network effect of that. And so the same guy I was talking about, Vivek Walda, just wrote an article yesterday about Boulder. And so go check out the Washington Post yesterday. So this guy studies it all, and he talked about the four things that Boulder does right, because Boulder is another great example of companies or areas that have kind of started out. Actually, they don't have the history we have, but they now are a recognized tech hub. And a couple of things that he points out. One is it has to start from entrepreneurs, and I'd like to say entrepreneurs, but it's not a government thing. It's not something that you can edict or legislate, so it really takes that as part of the core. It's got to be something where it takes time. You can't expect it to happen overnight. You can't expect it to happen in one election term. You can't expect some of those things. But you got to have some sustained kind of activity. The third thing is give before you get. You got to give before you get. Help your neighbors, your tech neighbors. I'd love to see when it starts getting boring, like start trading cards with folks on either side of you, including the person you don't know, and help them out. If they've got a startup, if they're looking for a job, if they're doing something where there might be a partner, it's like amazing when I do these events and talk to people. It's like, even though I think I know a lot of what's going on, I discover something new every time. And I really would encourage everybody to talk to the folks next to them and help them out, pay it forward, because again, that's what Silicon Valley does, that's what Boulder does, so let's do some of that. And the fourth thing was really just creating an environment, having programs, having activities. Some of you know Techstars came from Boulder, and that's a pretty good example. But there's other examples here. We've got Launchpad at UM, we've got accelerators, we have EDC. So I think we're doing some of the right things, but we could do more. And I really encourage everybody to do your piece, and whether it pays back or not, chances are it probably will sometime, but try to make an effort. So without further ado, talking about cool tech startups. And again, it was it was fun for me to go out, and I thought I knew all the startups in the area, and it turns out I didn't. There's like a bunch more than I knew about. And I'd like to announce the top three. So the panelists looked at, what are the top three doing? And it wasn't an in-depth business case kind of analysis. It was more like an elevator pitch of, okay, here's their pitch. Here's what they're doing. Is this market big? Does it seem big? Does this technology seem unique? And, is there any indication of early traffic? And top of the list with the most votes was modernizing medicine. So I'd like to congratulate Dan Kane. This might be getting old for you because you keep racking up these awards, but it really is well-deserved. I mean, Dan, as some of you know, was the founder of Blackboard. This is like his fifth startup, I think. Is that right? 5? And Dan keeps doing it, and he's doing it here, and he's hiring people here, and he's developing here. And he's just raised $12 million from his customers. How cool is that? He doesn't even have to give stakes away from VCs. I mean, so, that's just a wonderful example in South Florida of somebody that's making a dent and making a difference. Another new company, AppWorks. So Chris Campbell, where's Chris? There's Chris. So Chris, and he's got a physician partner as well. They came up with a clinical photography app. And so they're taking clinical pictures and syncing them securely to the cloud, and providing some of those point solutions that a lot of these other solutions are not doing, or when you're not ready to bite the bullet and do everything. There's lots of opportunity for improved kind of photography and digital images, and they've built an app around that, and it's pretty cool. Take a look afterwards. And then VoiceSpot. Where is Dan and Kishore? So Dan and Dr. Kishore. So VoiceSpot, the way, I don't know, I forget what their elevator pitch is, but I kind of view it as it's kind of like your own radio station talk show through iOS, through any iPad or iPhone. You can just pick a topic, any topic you like. You get an audience, you get followers, you can record it. So it's like podcasting, painless. It's like a webinar series without any kind of overhead, without the bureaucracy of setting things up and organizing them. You just do it, and you see who's talking, and it's got all kinds of neat controls in for social management of, when people get rowdy and out of line, etc. So they just launched, and I recommend you stop by their place and go start a VoiceSpot. So they're talking about the next generation of human interaction, and looking forward to that. One of the interesting things here is actually all three of these companies, there's an entrepreneur and a physician, which is kind of interesting, even VoiceSpot. So, and I think, but with VoiceSpot, I think there's only one physician doing coding. And so he's, and that's for real. So take a look at the app. It's pretty impressive. So, we got some other high flyers as well. So 3C Interactive, that's just an amazing company. I went and visited with John Duffy a couple of weeks back, and it was like a combination of a Soho loft and Hard Rock Cafe. It was just amazing, like the work environment, but they're kicking ass, they're getting work, they've got the biggest brands in the world that are depending on them, and it's still kind of hard to describe what they do, but an example is like if you get a text from Walgreens that says your prescription's ready, it probably came from them. So, they just better engage big brands, big companies with consumers, and there's just lots of opportunity in a mobile world to do that better. Another company got some votes, Flomio. So Flomio is a NFC startup. So where's the Flomio guys? Any Flomio guys? There's the Flomio guys. So, they're actually, a lot of folks were disappointed that the iPhone 5 didn't have NFC built in, but they actually built, there we go, take a look. So guerrilla marketing's allowed here, by the way. So these guys are starting a Kickstarter project, and they're going to go on live, next week? And you're going to be able to NFC enable your iPad or your iPhone, and they've got a whole platform to make that work, to start apps, to do all kinds of creative things. They've got an SDK and an API. So for, what is it, 29 bucks or 39 bucks? It's cheap. Like go out to Kickstarter and give these guys a hand. They're our neighbor. Just to try it if you want. STEM. Where's STEM? There we are. So folks, hold up your camera here. So this is something I just discovered like 2 days ago. This camera is in the Apple app stores. It's in Best Buy. It's like a remote control camera for iOS. Guess what, guys? Pembroke Pines, right here. How cool is that? There's just all kinds of cool companies. There's Consult a Doctor, telemedicine, another connected care. There's just all kinds of interesting companies that are making money. It's not just the starters. It's the guys that are actually in real businesses getting real money. And, take a look at the rest of these as well. So it's pretty impressive. Tell you what's really impressive.
Will there be a list of all those for people to check out?
Well, yeah, so actually just Google search top mobile startups in South Florida, boom, you'll get right to the page. So, and It is, exactly. It's on the SFTA website, so I encourage you to go out there, and we'll be kind of categorizing these guys and having their website links. And I encourage you to go out there. If they're on Kickstarter, buy their, try it out. It's worth it. Let's help out. The big deal now, the really cool part is the panelists, and let's talk about the history of the smartphone. So I'd like to welcome our panelists up on stage. Let's see, there's steps over on the other side here. So, I can't thank you guys enough for making the effort to come here and tell your stories to the crowd. It's really, I think, part of the network effect. It's part of the payback, the pay forward. I really appreciate it. I think a lot of the folks here do as well. So, it's really. So I guess some of you folks know this already, but let me just kind of go through a quick intro here. So John Sculley, obviously, a lot of folks know Sculley, obviously, for the fallout with Steve Jobs, right? But what they don't pay attention to is the fact that he did things like the Newton and things like the first PDA. He coined the term PDA. John was there in order to build the Newton. They did the collaboration to build ARM. The ARM chips that are in every smartphone today. That came about because of a project that John started back at Apple, where they had to come up with a new technology just to power the Newton. The Knowledge Navigator, if you haven't seen that video, 1987, it's just amazing. They were doing things like hyperlinking before the internet. They were doing things like Siri and Watson in 1987. It's just amazing. And so I recommend you go take a look at some of the accomplishments that John has got under his belt, as well as, I think, growing the company from Apple when it was 800 million up to 8 billion. So that's not bad numbers either. So thanks again for here. And in terms of payback, I really want to thank John for not just coming here, but John is on the board. He's an advisor. He's an investor with half of the tech companies here. And so he's the man, and the chance. So there you go, a couple of them right there. So anyway, thanks for that. Next is Scott Moody, and Scott, you may not know Scott per se, but I wish you had introduced me first, really. Okay, well, so we have a job today though to get something out of Scott. So this is not just all 20-year-old stuff here. So Scott was the founder of AuthenTec, and AuthenTec was the biometric security company that Apple just bought a couple of weeks ago. And in fact, the deal is closing when?
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday, unless you say something wrong here, right? So actually, Scott is an old friend of mine. I originally met Scott back about 12 years ago. I was interviewing for a job when he was starting AuthenTec, and it sounded cool and interesting. And actually, they had just spun out from Harris, and I'd love you to tell some of the story about coming out from Harris. And what it really did is, I kind of liked the job, but it really inspired me to do my own startup. I was working for IBM at the time, and knew about a technology that it could spin out, et cetera. And I figured, well, if he could do it, I could do it. But so not everything works out that way. Scott went on to take AuthenTec public on NASDAQ, and Apple just paid $365 million for AuthenTec. So it was well done. Prior to that, Scott was running a division at Harris Semiconductor, a $200 million division of Harris, and it probably makes sense to talk a little bit about how the technology was created and then you spun it out, and that's one of the interesting things, I think. Another interesting history, I've known Jaime Borras for years, but actually for the first time I saw his bio. And it's like, holy crow, this is going to take me like a half an hour just to go through this. But the short version is he's just a legend at Motorola. In fact, he designed some of the integrated circuits for the original cell phone, even before the smartphone. He ended up doing things like inventing PushToTalk and a number of the different mobile devices. He was the CTO of the Iden division, a senior fellow at Motorola, and I'm hoping to hear some of the stories he talks about where when the Simon came out and the Newton came out, Motorola started scrambling and said, oh crap, what are we going to do? And so we want to hear some of those stories. You left Motorola now, so you can talk about some of these things, right? But Jaime's another one that's paying it forward. He's got an organization called the Mobile Technology Consortium that's mobile entrepreneurs, the universities. He's tying everybody together. He just had an event the other day, but if you're into mobile, check out MTC. He's running that. He's also doing a consulting company, giving advice on silicon design and company design, and basically he's been there, done that for all of mobility. So that's really impressive. Thanks for coming out. And then, so Jerry Merckel. Jerry was there at the beginning. So the first smartphone, before we called them smartphones, Jerry was there, and he's got one, right? You gonna hold that up? Okay, come on, you gotta give it up. Hey, give it up.
Actually, I stopped in Boca Raton. Can you hear me okay? Is it on? Okay. The engineering manager of this program, the IBM program for the Simon, I think he sleeps with us. I'll stop on the way back and give it back to him. And there's some IBM Simoneers in here.
Yeah, how many Simoneers we got? I know we got at least one. Come on, 2 Simoneers? Nice. So actually go check out Business Week just did an awesome article about before the iPhone came the Simon, the Simoneers. So here's 3 of the Simoneers right here. Isn't that amazing? So
actually, I had the easy part. I was basically a salesman trying to convince senior management in IBM. Follow me, I know the way. But people like Jim McMillan and Jim Lewis and so forth, they really made it happen. They were down in the trenches and pulled it off. And Gary Wisco, the engineering manager, who lives right here in Boca Raton. And then the lead engineer was Frank Canova, who's now out in California. So they bore the brunt of making it happen. But here is one of the original Simons. It's not as cool as the i5, the packaging technology.
But it is rectangular and rounded corners.
It's about
so I don't know, you know.
I was thinking now I better go back to IBM Armonk and tell them they better get in on the play on the legal on the litigation. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. So just to finish the bio here. So aside from doing that, which is pretty impressive, right? And we got the guy here. He's gone on to start 6 other companies after IBM, and he's now a professor at UNF, and he's advising companies. He's teaching EE as well as entrepreneurship, and who better to talk about that than the guy that came up with the concept and sold it, and I know how hard it is to sell a concept in IBM. That's why I left. So there you go. So, hey, so thank you for being here, and that really was impressive. So why don't we start at that end and just finish the story? Like, how did this come about? You know, what kind of hurdles did you go through to really come up with this?
Well, once upon a time...
I'm sorry, what? There's a little switch there. There we go.
It was on. Maybe I knocked it off. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, in a far-off galaxy, in 1968, I joined IBM, the IBM site, and worked on the IBM Series 1 mini computer in product development. And then along the way, there was the notion of this secret project, the IBM PC, headed up by Don Estridge, who was quite a awe-inspiring leader. And so at that point, I went off and actually did an IBU. That was the first for IBM, a joint venture with General Motors. And actually, I had scheduled product on the '89 Corvette. Everything you see in the dash today, I had running, and Corvette engineering was ready to go. Except Delco cut me off at the pass. Something about IBM stealing their business internally. They were right. I was after it. But I worked on DASD products on the Series 1 mini computer, and the IBM PC company ran into a difficulty with some of their vendors on hard disk drives. So I got called back to the IBM PC company to work on that problem. Took care of it. But along the way, I had a lot of job assignments, but one in particular was advanced technology, being a manager of advanced technology. So it gave me freedom to explore futures, where the future's going, and develop actually some product concepts and bring them forward to senior management. And actually, Chris is quite right. Selling a large organization like IBM is very difficult. But Paul Muggy, who was then the IBM vice president and general manager of the PC company, was my boss. And I walked in one day. Now, I had a lot of help with this. There was a whole team of people. But I carried in a presentation on the PC of tomorrow. And so I actually had a very fancy industrial design model. You might have seen it in Business Week. It was yellow. And I was saying to Paul, this device can be anything you can imagine. It can be a phone. It can be a computer. It can be a game player. I can watch Gator football on this. Let your imagination run. So some Gators there. So I actually had, at the time, PCMCAA cards. You may not know what that is, but there's a slot on the bottom of this one. That's how you can give it personality, like music. So I reached into my pocket and I pulled out a simulated PCMCAA card, ZZ Top. And I took that and I put it in the phone and I said, look, Paul, we're listening to ZZ Top. And he said to me, who are they? And I said, Paul, you have no clue what's going on. This is really what's happening. To his credit, he funded this, and then people like Jim McMillan and others actually made it happen. So I actually went on to other endeavors. So once it got going with Gary and Frank Canova and the others, went on to some other adventures inside the IBM company. So that's how it got started. And to Paul's credit, he secured IBM commitment to do it.
That's great. So what advice do you give to the startups out there that that 20 years later still plays true? I mean, it sounds like prototypes, demos.
Well, here's my personal model, but there are different ways to do it. If I go to start an enterprise, I like to have a working model. I like to have intellectual property protection, and I need to have an outstanding business plan along with an executive presentation. At that point, I start looking for an equity investment. However, I just completed a competition with some MBA students sponsored by the Department of Energy. And as we entered into this, it was just the reverse logic. We actually had to form a company, an LLC. We had to open a corporate account. And I find it interesting. I'm now talking to the university with regard to maybe there's something to this because it kind of gets you into the fray much earlier. And so actually we have a project underway and UNF is actually looking to do this. But it's hard, it's difficult. You got to have the drive. You're going to get a lot of no's. I've learned you get no, but you just have to keep asking. And all of a sudden somebody says, okay, how much do you need? $1 million, here's a check. So.
There you go. So, Jaime, how about what was the Motorola reaction when the Simon came out and the Newton came out? Tell us, bring us back.
I'll just start out with the phrase of never give up for those entrepreneurs out there that are starting up, and you're going to have a lot of roadblocks in front of you, but never give up, keep charging, you'll get there. So I guess it was about late in the 1980s. We had George Fisher. He was the chairman and CEO of Motorola at the time. He came down to Plantation. Wow, that was a big thing for us down in Plantation. And he actually gathered our group. At the time, I was in the data products and trunking products group. And I have some pictures that I sent you, but what he did was he actually congratulated us for the super growth that we had on that division. But at the same time, he says, I want you guys to really lead the next personal communication set of products after all of the words that the Simon and also the Newton were out. And so what happened was that the two guys that really led it were Pat Richardson and Ron Scheider. They actually left Plantation and they went up to Chicago to do that, under the mentorship of George Fisher. So that was a project that he really undertook on his own. And there were a lot of pieces that were not there at the time. I actually stayed back in Florida because I didn't want to move to the cold weather. So I stayed back, but I kind of stayed as a adjunct member from far away because I kept very close contacts with them. And there were a lot of new and things that came out of that project. Obviously, the display was one of the new things that came up from the work with Kodak. Obviously, after a few years after that, George went to be the CEO of Kodak. So that was part of the initial partnership that they started. But the Envoy product was actually launched about in 1993 or so, a few years after that meeting. And it was all under the supervision of George Fisher. He really put a lot of effort into that and make it happen. I mean, he's one of the brightest and visionary fellows that I've ever met. And you know, he would really make it very, give you a lot of pressure, but very nicely. In other words, he really was a real, very nice person. So from there, I actually stayed here, like I said, and then I started working at that time under the second generation of cordless telephones. I don't know if you guys have heard about CT2. That went on for maybe 2 or 3 years. And the idea behind that was to actually develop a handset and a base under $100. At the time, that was really amazing. But what that was really the impetus to get us to where we are today in the smartphone arena, because we had to develop a lot of the integrated circuits that really reduced the overall cost and improve the performance, as well as getting the battery life to a point where you could use it more often. That product went out to, we had sites in Hong Kong and the UK and around a lot of the emerging countries. After that, I then joined the IDEN division, and at that time, under the leadership of Sam Desai and also Bill Warner. And at the time, if you look at the Simon, I don't know if any of you saw the very first phone from Nextel at the time, right, which was really the Lingo. That was the first digital voice phone. It was huge. It was about that size with a very long, tall antenna, right? And my challenge was when that phone was introduced, actually, under worst case conditions in weak signal conditions, you would hear a lot of robotic type of voices. And that was not cool, right? So it was cool for other guys, but not really for the industry. So what my challenge was to really fix that and then take that to the size of the existing, at the time, cell phones, and then be able to compete, right? Because we were not competing. And just some history about that, the IDEN technology essentially is the same technology that's used today in the smartphones, in the LTE. I mean, that was really amazing. That's a piece of trivia. And why is that? Because the way that Nextel really came along, and I guess the Spring guys are here, they may know this, but the way that Nextel made it big was taking the 25 kilohertz channels of public safety and making them usable for voice and telephony, which was not being able to, it wasn't doable before. And so they got a huge set of spectrums, but not contiguous, right? It was a separate spectrum all over the 800 megahertz band. And what we did, actually, it was really Motorola research that put together the iDEN technology with the OFDM-A, orthogonal frequency multiple access technology that allows you to hop around and be able to, in 25 kilohertz channels, we were able to get, at the time, 19 kilohertz of data. So it was really a big push. The first smartphone that Motorola introduced actually was a smartphone from the iDEN group, and it was called the i930. I don't know if you guys remember. I do have one in there, but I'll grab it and show it you later. It was actually the first smartphone introduced with the Windows 2003 operating system. It actually was very well received by everyone, and essentially it was the first world phone for Sprint Nextel. At that time, Sprint had already bought Nextel, and we actually added GSM as well as iDEN to the phone, and the Windows, which really brought up all of your Outlook and everything else. It was actually a flip phone also, so the display was about 2.3 inches across, and it was really cool. I mean, I remember using it because you always use it for about 6 months before you actually take it out, and in the plane or outside on the airport walking with it, people would stop me. What is that? Oh, I gotta kill you before I tell you. So it was really kind of cool. Gina as Renivas was also with me at the time, and we had a lot of fun doing that. But just to and after that, essentially we introduced the first WiMAX, actually prototypes for the whole 4G at the time, for 4G for Sprint, right? Obviously, WiMAX is now taking a second place to LTE, and LTE is really going to bring a lot of new services that will essentially make your smartphone more of an agent and be able to do more things that would be intuitive to you, right? It will learn from the things that you do. If you look at the latency from LTE, it's 10 times less than that of 3G. And the data rates is a factor of 5 to 10 higher. So you'll have transparency to be able to work in the cloud. You'll have transparency to be able to interact with people. And PushToTalk was one of the technologies that we developed on iDEN. And the trick behind that was essentially the fact that it was instantaneous. You press the talk, and you essentially would say, in less than 500 milliseconds, you would get it to the other side. And the whole idea there was that if you give it to a policeman, you wanted to differentiate between shoot and not shoot. and that was what we were after, right? And a lot of the technologies that are out there today doing push-to-talk have never been able to cut to that small, fast latency, right? So what's happening is that they take a long time to set it up because the actual communication systems take that long to set it up. But LTEs, in the other hand, will allow you to do much faster. So hopefully there'll be some application that will give you a much faster push-to-talk.
All right.
So
well, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, appreciate it, and thanks for your contribution. So, Scott, take us back to Harris. You know, what happened? You know, where did this technology come from? The biometrics, and you know, how did you decide to, you know, proceed with that or take it?
So
out?
a few things that are, you know, I guess interesting. I was a VP GM of about a $200 million division, and this idea was actually brought to me by a couple smart guys. So the thing about it is, though, I think, you know, in a big company, one of the things that you find is that I'm a big believer that engineers drive innovation, right? I mean, you know, startups are done by engineers, right? They're not done by, with all due respect, accountants, lawyers. Apparently there's some physicians in the category now, but, you know, but it's really a technical oriented thing. I mean, I don't care if that technology is retail, that technology is clothing, right? But it really is driven by engineers. And what happens is in a big company is the engineers kind of go to the back room, right? And in the front room, you have these marketing and sales pukes, right? With all due respect. Right? That's actually a term of endearment, right? So
That's what you were interviewing me for.
So exactly. I think it's appropriate, that term. So really, what happens is though is that they're out talking to customers, and the customer says, "I want this." And so they run back to engineering and they go, "The customer wants this." And the engineers go, "Well, that's stupid. I mean, you know, why would I do that? It's, you know." But no, you got to do that. We need it now, you know, blah, blah, blah. It takes them a year to get it out, and then, you know, usually nobody wants it or not to the quantity, right? So, I was, particularly for a startup, right? If you do exactly what the customer tells you to do, it's going to be wrong and it's going to be late. Why? Because they're telling you what the competitor just told you yesterday. So they're kind of relaying that message to you. So if you do exactly that, it's really not going to be the right product. Now, for various reasons, you know, big companies or whatever, it may be successful or relatively successful, but a startup, it's really not going to work. What you really have to understand is what is the problem the customer is trying to solve, even a problem that they don't know that they have. I mean, nobody asked for a PC, nobody asked for a smartphone, right? Nobody asked for a fingerprint sensor. In fact, nobody asked for it the last 12 years we built any until recently. So, you know, the fact of the matter is that people don't necessarily come and ask you just for that. So really what happened was there's a couple of guys, right? One turned out to be the co-founder, you know, came to me with this idea, right? Unfortunately, the semiconductor sector at Harris was tanking. It's a very cyclical industry. We were the only division making money of the three divisions, and you know the corporation really didn't want to allocate more money to this idea. We came up with the idea of spinning it out. So the company was founded by myself and what I refer to as a smart guy, Dale Setlak. Now Dale was smart. I mean, you know, he is a super nice guy. But you know, he had, in a big corporation, he didn't really fit, right? He had long hair, he was kind of bald on top, and he had a nose ring, right? So really, if you really think about it, there's only two kinds of people that actually look like that. Either you're really smart or you're homeless, right? So Dale fit in, you know, the smart, you know, category. So we went out, we raised a little bit of money, you know, $3.5 million with the idea. Eventually raised, you know, $70 million, and then, you know, took it public in 2007. So, but, you know, I think the thing is that, you know, it's that, you know, germ of an idea. It's usually generated, you know, frankly, with somebody with a technical or technically oriented background that's out there solving a problem. And, you know, maybe I'm going to slightly disagree, right, with a comment on just keep working at it. Believe me, it is an unbelievable amount of work. I mean, I dedicated really my life, right, to, you know, founding and fostering this company. In fact, you know, when we said we were selling the company, my wife, who has coffee with three ladies, you know, really for the last 20 years, told them we had sold the company to Apple. They were very excited, and they told her, you know, Kay, we thought you were crazy when you told us that Scott was quitting a good job and he was starting a company, and you had 3 little girls at home, right? But we're happy for you. But it was a tremendous amount of work. My wife was in it, right? My daughters were excited about it. In fact, when we went public, we opened the NASDAQ the next day. We rang the bell. We were on TV. My 3 daughters rang the bell to open the stock exchange that day, right? So, they're very startup oriented. My oldest actually texted me while I was sitting down here with another idea. So she just needs to fund it herself. But anyway, what I would say though is I've kind of been on this other side of the table. There are a lot of ideas out there, and I thought the fingerprint sensor, I'd never seen it before, but there were 50 other companies out there with fingerprint sensors. We clearly had a different idea. We were going to drive down the cost. I don't want to talk about that now since we're being acquired, right? We drove it down to an 8 millimeter by 8 millimeter size and still can get it, identify you uniquely in a nanosecond, right? We can see through very heavy coatings and plastics and a number of other things that are sitting over that sensor. So we had a vision, but there were like 50, maybe 100 other companies. And when I talk to a lot of companies, it is actually somewhat rare that I actually see a truly unique idea. It's those that go out and execute on it. They drive hard, they execute, they're the ones that make it happen. If you think about Facebook, there were 75 companies that competed with Facebook when they started, but of course Facebook rose to the top. It's a good strategy, hard work, a little bit of luck, right? But the fact of the matter is they drove hard. But I would also tell you that the probability that your startup is actually going to make it and you are going to be wealthy associated with it, you have a better chance to replace Dan Marino, right? At Miami here in the next couple years. It is a grueling job. The probabilities are relatively low. And what I tell people all the time is that when that idea is not working, I see people that are in something for 5, 6, 7 years, and you just want to say, man, move on to something else, go get a job, and they do keep trying. Now, I'm not people talk about, and in California, I think it was said earlier, fail fast, right? I'm actually not a believer in failure, right? Things fail, ideas fail, businesses fail, entire countries will fail. But you don't fail unless you give up. Otherwise, to me, it's just a learning experience. This idea didn't work, this technology didn't work, right? I'm on to the next one, right? So I do think that there is a benefit, right? Now, obviously, at the same time, we drove hard. Our first product didn't work. I mean, it didn't work. I mean, there were no electrons coming out of the darn thing, and I'm not even sure any were going in. So, I mean, and just one more, just the story. I mean, those 2 nights, I called the team together. It was like 7 o'clock at night. We all got in a conference room, and it's like the parts failing was the fingerprint sensor. It was made out of silicon, and we really can't figure out the problem. I didn't really tell everybody we were running out of money. But that was my job. They looked to me to do that. So I gave a rah-rah speech, and we all went out drinking, which clearly is an important part of the startup. So the next night, we actually figured out what we needed to do. We were going to just fix some things, get it out real quick again. We laid out a plan, another rah-rah speech. We went, drinking. And both nights I got home, the 2 longest conversations I've ever had with my wife about work. I was like, what have I done? I left a good job. I've spent all our money. I am so sorry. And at the end of the second night, she's just like, you know what you need to do. So go do it, right? So sometimes you have those moments. Now, everything we did wasn't right. We changed. We made mistakes. We, if you will, failed at certain ideas. Our first product failed. But I do think that is, important, right? There are a lot of startups there. There's very few, truly rare new ideas. It's a tremendous amount of work. You need to learn through what you're doing, modify it, or sometimes just dump it and move on to the next thing.
So, thank you. So John, take us back to Newton. And was Simon on the radar? Was that something you were paying attention to, or what? How did that was that in the scope of things, or you were just going after the Knowledge Navigator vision? Maybe you could bring us back to that time frame.
Well, we were very aware of Simon, and we thought it was a pretty cool product. But let me take you back to January 1993 at CES. I was one of the keynoters that year, and they had expected I was going to talk about personal computers, because that's what Apple did and what IBM did, and a lot of companies that were then displaying at CES. And the theme of my speech was, I think it's out on the internet there somewhere, was mobility. And I made a prediction that that in the future there would be a multi-billion-dollar industry around mobile devices that would combine the telephone and the personal computer capability, but it would have new kinds of user experiences with gestures and things of this sort. And I gave a hint of a product we were working on, which was called Newton, but it wasn't ready for release at that point. I was ridiculed by every major publication, including the Wall Street Journal, for what is this marketing guy trying to tell us where technology is going.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And they said, this is absurd. How can there be an industry where I had said that we sell personal computers in the hundreds of millions. These mobile devices are going to be sold in the many billions. And this was a completely absurd idea. And the reason I bring that up was that it is really difficult to get people to think about things when they are so conditioned to thinking about the same facts in a different way. I wasn't recruited to Apple because I knew anything about technology. I wasn't recruited because I was a product visionary. I was recruited to bring big brand marketing. And yet, we started to see there were a few really smart people around Apple who started to see that there was another great opportunity that was going to be beyond personal computers, and this was around 1987. Last year I talked about the Knowledge Navigator, so I won't bore you with that again. But that was really the inspiration for a lot of the stuff we did in the following years. So I saw my role not as the product creator, but as the person who could be able to put resources behind really smart people who had really good ideas. And the thing I was interested in was, what can we do in mobility? One of those groups was a startup that spun out of Apple. It was started by Andy Hertzfeld, one of the first software engineers on the original Mac. In fact, he did the original demo of the dancing Pepsi cans that Steve had him make for me coming to Apple back in 1982, when Steve was using the guise that I was going to, that Pepsi was going to buy a lot of these great new products, Macintosh, when it came out, pre-introduction of Mac. Bill Atkinson, who was the first software engineer at Apple, employee number one, a software engineer, and a fellow named Mark Peratt, a very bright guy who was the CEO of this group, and it was called General Magic. And the investors in it were Apple, who had the largest investment in it. I was on the board. Sony, because Sony was a consumer electronics company. Apple was bringing software know-how. And AT&T, who at that time was Bob Kavner, who was very interested in what the next kinds of devices AT&T could sell. So this was a project that was trying to build a handheld device with new kinds of user experience interfaces called General Magic. Bill Atkinson, by the way, was the guy who created HyperCard, if anybody remembers that product. So that was one project we had over here. Then in a completely separate project inside of Apple, there was a man named Larry Tesler. Larry Tesler was the engineer at Xerox PARC, who Xerox had made a small investment in Apple, and as a courtesy, they invited Steve Jobs to come over and look around back in
It's a courtesy.
back in
The rest is
about
history.
1989, and Larry Tesler was the computer scientist who took him around, and you know the rest of the story. Larry joined Apple, worked in the Lisa group, and then eventually he was head of advanced technology. But his key role at Newton was he was the leader of the Newton team. And working with him was a fellow named Steve Capps, who was also one of the first engineers on the original Mac. So the quality of people who were working on mobility were just the best of the best that Apple had. What many people may not know is that people talk about when Newton came out, it failed. It got blamed for terrible handwriting. Handwriting was never intended to be a very important aspect of it. It was really much more about the fact you could hold this thing in your hand, and it could do a lot of the graphics that you would see on a Macintosh. And we were doing some very primitive wireless technology. So you could take one Newton, and I could be about as far away from Chris as I am now, and be able to send a message over. Remember, there was no commercial internet. There were none of the things we're used to today. So these things were people knowing where the future was going to go, but there just wasn't a lot of stuff you could rely on. The interesting thing was, in order to do that in a mobile device, no microprocessor existed that would enable you to do graphics-based software in a mobile device that could run on a battery. So Larry Tesler came to me with a project idea that he had, which was that Apple ought to go design a microprocessor. Now, we had never been in the microprocessor business before. That's much more technical than the kinds of things Apple did in silicon. So we cobbled together a co-founding team that was made up of Herman Hauser, who started Acorn Computer and was a PhD engineer out of Cambridge University, King's College. Olivetti, who in those days was in the personal computer business, and Apple. And Apple owned 47% of this venture. Olivetti owned 47%, and Herman Hauser and his team owned the rest. And they were designing a very low power microprocessor, but it had to be floating point. Those of you who remember back in those days, the Intel processor was integer based, which meant it was good at arithmetic, but it wasn't good at floating point arithmetic. And so
that's pretty good for a marketing guy, right?
Well, I know there's some technical people, so I'm giving you just a few little pointers. There was Alan Kay wrote the original Smalltalk, back in 1971. Followed that with, he didn't write it, but another one about 10 years later called Schema came along. Schema was an object-oriented program language as well. And our team up at One Kendall Square outside of MIT, mostly MIT guys, were developing a unique software operating system for the Newton. And it had to have things like garbage collection and all these things, which in those days were not available commercially. Well, this processor that they designed is called the ARM. And the ARM processor is now in almost every mobile device in the world, from the iPhone, which uses a derivative of the ARM core, to every other smartphone that's out there today.
It's even going into servers now.
Yeah, it's actually, I've seen it in servers. They're actually doing servers, and you can see, I'm working with one company. We have a company I'm involved with servers, and they're actually putting hundreds of ARM processors and building blade servers that are well beyond anything you could possibly have, thought about even, 4 or 5 years ago, and that's part of what's being built in data centers for the cloud. But in any event, just going back to sort of connect the dots here, if you look at the role of the Newton, I was pushed out of Apple in 1993 because I refused to license the Macintosh operating system. Every time we ran a business model on it, it showed that unless we could get 25% market share, it wouldn't work. We would lose money, and we'd have to lay off a very large number of people. We weren't a software company. We had great software people, but we were a company that made its money selling hardware. Some years, Apple went on to license its software. It didn't work financially, and at the end, when people were speculating whether Apple would go bankrupt, at that time, Gil Amelio was CEO of the company, and one of the two great things he did that I think he deserves credit for. One was he sold Apple's 47% of the ARM technology, which had become an independent company, for $800 million that kept the doors open at Apple. And the second thing he did was he bought Next from Steve Jobs and brought Steve back to Apple. And Apple would have been history. There never would have been an Apple without Steve coming back. So it's interesting how you can sort of see things that start out that end up being important in the future. For those of you who are building companies, sometimes people think that starting companies or events like creating Simon or creating Newton or creating Macintosh, that these are big important people doing big important stuff. It doesn't happen that way at all. It's just guys hanging out, showing up at 1 in the morning, arguing over stuff, people, getting mad at each other and walking out of rooms and calling each other names. And
Steve never did that.
No, never. No. But you can't imagine how ordinary it is in the way great stuff happens, and yet you get these incredibly brilliant people who get an idea in their head that they're going to do something that's going to change the world. I mean, I can recall back in 1984, we'd introduced the Macintosh, and Steve comes into my office with this little model. There was nothing in it, just a model that had been made up by our industrial design team at Steve's request. And I said, "So what's that, Steve?" And he said, "Well, that's the Mac phone." I said, "Oh, so when are you going to build that?" He said, "Well, actually, we can't yet. But if you looked at that Mac phone model, and I think someone actually found one or got a picture of one. It was on the Japanese TV documentary, but it actually has a screen on it about the size of the iPhone screen. It used a stylus, even though Steve says he didn't like stylus. This one had a stylus. And it was going to sit on your desk, and it actually had a little handset, so it shows you how, sort of like, that's what we thought phones would look like. So there are probably ideas out there now, Chris, that people are sort of thinking about and experimenting with that seem just as crude. Right. And a few of them will survive, and maybe even a smaller number will end up being the genesis of stories that another group of people sitting here 20 years from now will be talking about on the future of what comes after mobility.
Oh, that's a great story. Go ahead, Scott. So just to follow up on what John just said and a couple of things, right? So when he went to the CES show, he talked about mobility, right, versus a computer. So if he had gone out and asked customers, what do you want today? They would have probably said, I want something, and they probably would have said something that looks like the IBM machine or something. In other words,
you know, if he had just gone out and asked customers, what do you want, instead of trying to solve a problem and having a vision toward the future, right? And that's what I was talking about before. The second thing is, I think everybody mentioned here, and you know, I was obviously joking about sales and marketing, but the fact of the matter is that it was associated with really smart people, right? Every one of us named people, right, that were really critical to the success, the development, you know, so on and so forth. So it's the recognition of those smart people. It's the recognition of those ideas. When we had talked, I mean, I would say that I did take the vision that these guys had and helped, you know, drive it forward and had my own visions for it. But the fact of the matter is, I never even thought about a fingerprint sensor until Dale Setlack, right, who I did not know, right, walked in my office with this idea that he wanted my division to fund, right? But I did recognize a smart guy. I assumed he wasn't homeless. We had a guard out front. So, but I think that is critical and kind of goes to what I said before.
You're making me, I got to give a shout out. You talked about blade servers. So first one also made here. Ken Honeycutt was a co-founder at OmniCluster. Al Durundo, sitting next to him, was a founding engineer, developed software for it. So right here in South Florida.
I really don't want to monopolize more than my time, but what you say just resonates to just one story I would love to tell you. Steve Jobs was a great admirer of Akio Morita from Sony and Dr. Land from Polaroid. And Dr. Land had been pushed out of Polaroid, and he had a laboratory up on the Charles River in Cambridge. And Steve said, let's go up and visit Dr. Land. So he and I went up there, and we're sitting in this big, pretty formal boardroom. And Dr. Land and Steve started talking, and I'm the witness. I have no contribution to this other than to relate to you what happened. So Dr. Land says, you know, Steve, he said, I don't believe that anyone actually invents products. We actually discover them. And he said, I had just always felt that the Polaroid camera was something that just always existed. And then I got a chance to see it in my mind before other people. And I discovered it. And I knew from that mind picture exactly what it should look like. And Steve thought for a moment, and he said, yeah, that's how I thought about personal computers. He said, I don't believe in consumer research. And Steve never did any consumer research while I worked with him. And he said, I couldn't go out and talk to people about what a personal computer should be like because their context was calculators, or their context was these big, giant machines that sat inside of air-conditioned rooms. So how could I ask somebody, what kind of personal computer do you want? So he said, I had to go and create it. And he said, yeah, I just have these products inside of me, you know, and I feel them. And when they're ready to come out, then I have to bring them out. And you may have often heard when Steve would do his product launches, he'd say, well, I've got one more product inside of me that I've got to get out, you know, and it might be the iPad or the iPhone. And so the thing that I observed was that here are two geniuses who really were product designers. That's not what I do. And creativity to them was that these things always existed. And that all they were doing was revealing them. And in the case of Steve, he was a perfectionist, so they had to be revealed in a way with no compromises. And I can recall other meetings, which I won't bore you with Akio Morita from Sony and Steve. Again, I'm the witness, not the, you know, the visionary. But it's really amazing to be around, you know, people of that talent and how they think about products, as they are absolutely convinced that this is what's going to happen in the world. I mean, there isn't the slightest bit of doubt, you know. So they may fail, yep, but they never doubt.
That's great. Yeah. So we are running late, but I did have part of our agenda was like, what's next? So I don't know if we can go with all four of you, but who wants to say like, what's next? Okay. So we're all I guess we got smartphones. We want them faster or bigger, smaller, whatever. But what's the next?
Well, I believe the next big thing is sensors. When I joined the personal computer industries in the early days of the microprocessor, and we're now in the fairly early days of sensors, the ability to take miniaturized sensors, and sensors can literally see, they can observe, they can sense in almost any way you can imagine, and connect them to cloud computers where you have the ability to capture real-time information with sensors from many different sources, and then be able to do big data analytics on a scale where no one could have conceived of a decade ago, and never throw anything away. It's going to change medicine. It's going to change how we think about weather systems. It's going to change, almost anything you can imagine, from air traffic control to, just about everything on the planet.
Internet of Things.
Yeah,
All the things
Internet of Things, exactly. One last data point. Gartner Group has forecasted by 2020 that there will be 20 billion wireless connected devices used on the planet. Well, there are only 7 billion people. So those others are M2M, machine to machine. A lot of that is because of sensors.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I mean, if you think about what's going to happen next, it's a lot about what the device that you have in your hands or within you, someplace in your body,
embedded,
will be collecting information, and it will be intuitive to the things that you want to do next. Why? Because those sensors are going to be gathering information and are going to learn the behavior behind all of the things that you do. And it will tend to help you. It'll be an agent, it'll be a personal a personal agent that will help you do those things and guide you. And it can actually instantaneously communicate with the cloud, get the processing so that you can actually get the things done much faster and without really thinking about it. And if you're going to do something wrong, it'll flag you. Hey, think that twice. So I think that's coming. And also the fact that the networks are going to a much faster, low latency, high data rates.
Yeah.
It'll allow
just makes it all
to
possible.
do a lot
Right?
of things in the cloud. And that's why you think, well, what about what they're doing today? Well, you'll have multiple things that could be done, and then you take all of that big data and do processing in the cloud and processing on yourself, and that's where it'll go to the next level, and also all of the things that we can tell about your behavior when you're handling things.
So I think there's going to be a lot more physician co-founders probably helping some of that. So I know we're probably way over. Is that right? Or
I would never stop this.
so
not even
this
for a
is
second.
more
Integration-
predictions. Yeah, let's
integration of
go.
silicon with neurons.
Silicon
the
and
horizon.
neurons.
And it also reminds me, the Internet of Things, maybe it's all of us connected to the neural network. But I do observe my grandchildren when we go to dinner, sitting there twitting each other. And somehow or other, they're on the neural network now and not connected to, I don't know. So wonder where all this goes.
Yeah. Scott?
So I mean, I obviously agree with all that, but I do think geography is a big thing, right? Some of the activities I'm involved in are in Africa, I think, as you know, particularly Rwanda, where I've done mission work before. And you talk about an entire continent, right, between there, India, parts of China, other countries where, honestly, we have often no idea how blessed we are to have just been born by a miracle of God in the United States, right, or have come to it. So, you really have no concept of poor, right, until you're, in West Rwanda, right? So, I think, and I look, and yet sometimes you'll even see somebody with a cell phone, right? And my cell phone will work in a lot of places we go, right? So, and these are places, there's no road, you have to walk forever, everybody lives in just a dirt hut. And so, people they're entrepreneurial. They have to be entrepreneurial to live that day. And I think that the fact of the matter is that, a lot of the technologies we have today that will come out will find themselves being spread in these other countries. And it's not us versus them. I think it really brings all society, up. And I think that's just a tremendous, opportunity for people.
Well, very good. So, Hunter, do we want to open to a couple of questions? Any questions out there that folks have been stewing over? That here's your chance to get the guys that have been there and done that. Here we go. There's a Mike. Go ahead.
Akshay Sharma, Gartner Group. As a former CTO of a smartphone, failed one here locally, I need some advice. I just filed a provisional patent a few weeks ago on a new idea for gun locks, because I think there's too many guns out there. We should be location aware. We should forbid guns at public settings, but the NRA probably wants it for home use or wherever they need to use it. What would your advice be if someone like an entrepreneur had such an idea with a provisional patent filing?
Anybody want to take that?
So,
So if you have a provisional patent application, okay, if you have a provisional patent application, you begin the process. But if it were me, I'd start working up a business plan. Where are the markets? How are you going to sell it? What are the channels? What's the ROI? I would work to build a prototype, and I would have those things in my portfolio, and then I would seek equity investment. So just declaring you have an idea and having a provisional patent application be very hard to attract investors to get started.
So I have my mother was from Brooklyn, right? So most of my personality faults are really directly related. So, so I'm pretty direct. And, I would tell you that, honestly, I tell people this all the time, ideas and patents are absolutely worthless, right? It's only execution that counts, right? I mean, so, I hear 1,000 people. How many times do you talk to somebody who said, well, I had that idea and I thought about that 20 years ago and blah, 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 right? So one, just to that point, I'll just be more direct about it. It's what are you going to do with it, right? I mean, I think that's part of your question, though. But you do need to move forward with it. Second, you're playing in a very politically, which is a really bad place to be, area. There's all kinds of liability associated with that. So I would say you're picking a pretty difficult area, unless you have something that is just world-shattering, and it's pretty tough. Gun.
Other thoughts, questions?
My mom would be proud, but I don't think my dad would.
There you go.
So the opening that Lenny did such a great job with talked about building a globally recognized technology community in South Florida. You guys have sort of lived that. What advice would you give for South Florida Technology Alliance and the people that are gathered here tonight? How do we build our South Florida brand that not necessarily to compete or rival others, but to raise the visibility that there is an amazing talent pool in South Florida? How do we get that message out to the rest of the world?
Well, I think you're starting here tonight by networking. So networking is really key. But in your network, you'll need different skills and different capabilities, whether it be investors or engineers who are really smart, or people who have a previous startup experience, maybe act as mentors. So it's all about networking, extensive communication.
I think I'd like to add to that. Events that actually show the products that people are building or are thinking to build, so that they can actually be funded and support it. Along with that brings the networking together with that. And I think what you guys are doing, trying to unite all of the different companies, I think that's very valuable as well.
Come on, Scott. What would your mother say?
Bullshit. I'm joking. I'm joking. No, actually, she would say that. So, you know, it's tough. I mean, I'm actually moving to Raleigh. I just decided, you know, I want to do another startup. I want to be active. I'm working on a couple of ideas, but I just want to be around it. And, you know, I do tell people there's probably 10 places in the U.S. where location is not a penalty to your startup, right? Silicon Valley, beyond none, is the best. I mean, you shouldn't compare yourself with it. You shouldn't try to be like it. You know, I don't know what the other 9 are. We looked, decided to, you know, we're in Melbourne. It's not in there. You know, we did it, but it was harder. I will tell you, looking back, it was probably harder. Being able to hire people, you know, get money. I mean, we raised $70 million. We were eventually successful, but it, you know, was relatively rare. I would say that these events are incredibly important, and to have them all the time. If you go to Silicon Valley, if you go up to RTP, if you go up to Boulder or any of these places, Austin, they are almost every night, you know, having events, whether it's speaking, just, you know, beer bashes for the engineers after work. It is incredibly important. You know, all of this mixing, the angels and the, you know, the technology that you have here. I'm a believer in incubators, but I am not a believer in government or, honestly, university incubators. They tend to be much more bureaucratic. In a commercially based incubator, it's based by investors, and it's like 3 months, show something. I mean, 3 months I would argue is sometimes short, but whether it's 3 or 6 months, it's like show something, right, you know, or get out, right? It's not a matter of renting the space and, you know, trying to show how many jobs you've had. So I think, you know, this event, the number of startups you have, the fact that there have been some successful startups here and they're doing it again, it's going to take time, right? There's not a couple of things, but you just got to keep after it. You got to keep driven. And I think it's, you know, like I said, this event and other events are critical.
So I would say that building successful entrepreneurial companies is really, really hard. It's hard work. It takes a lot of timing. It takes a lot of luck. And if you look at California, just as a reference point, that Silicon Valley is it is probably, you know, the exceptional model of how to do everything to create the environment for, you know, great companies to emerge. But Silicon Valley didn't create all the mobile technology that's being created in San Diego. You go to San Diego, and that's where a lot of the mobile technology is being done, and a lot of healthcare stuff is being done down there as well. You go to Los Angeles, and there is a lot of stuff that's not being created in Silicon Valley, and it's all around, you know, content, media services. So it really is important to have something to start with. So to just say, let's take this geography of South Florida and suddenly say, you know, we can have an equal shot at starting almost any kind of startup business, I think that's really naive. I look around at the businesses that I'm involved with and say, so what is the legacy here in Florida that we can start to build off of to get some inspiration or to pull talent, to get role models and things of that sort? One obvious one is healthcare. I mean, some people think that healthcare in Florida is a lot of old people needing healthcare. There happen to be a lot of really interesting healthcare companies that are being created here in Florida. And there's a lot of talent around. So, you know, healthcare is one of those things I think that South Florida technology community could start with an advantage, not start behind the starting line. The other observation I'd make is that in different eras, different things are important. And right now, everything is going mobile. I mean, there isn't any company that is in the high technology world that isn't working on a mobile strategy or doesn't have, a mobile offering or isn't thinking about doing it in some major way. I was just in San Francisco last week. Dreamforce, which is the big event that Salesforce.com runs, they spent $2 billion this year, most of it around mobile. They weren't even in mobile, before. So the speed at which mobility is touching everything. So I would start and say, well, let's see. There's healthcare. Turns out that California is number one in medical device companies. Florida happens to be number two. Many people didn't even know that. So you got healthcare and everything related around it, and you have mobility. So my first two filters would be, so what are the opportunities, or who's doing what in those two fields? Doesn't mean there won't be other companies that fall outside of that field, but you don't start with any built-in advantage. And in fact, you've got to compete with what's going on in places like Austin, Texas, and Research Triangle, and San Diego, and Silicon Valley, and Seattle, and Boston, and stuff like that. And so I'd say, at least pragmatically ask the question, why aren't I doing something in healthcare and something with mobility?
Very good. So we really appreciate, I think, everybody's time and input and wisdom here. And I do want to leave a little time to still network, because that's part of the objective here, is to if you haven't traded cards with your neighbor yet, pull them out, start doing that. And we want to save some time for getting together.
Chris and the panel, ladies and gentlemen, please.